Hello all of you lovely people, Jules here for WhatCulture.com, and I want to talk to you today about designers who hated their creations. You see, to create something as complex and engaging as a video game, a lot of thought has to go into the process and can often take years in order to get the idea from paper to a playable state. Therefore, with that amount of time spent staring at nothing but the problems and imperfections of a title, you can probably start to understand why many artists, creative minds, and designers end up only seeing these flaws. So what we've done is collect some games that drew the stink eye from their originators, despite often being great games, in order to pass on a message. It is okay to be imperfect. No one is perfect, and it is okay to be aware of your own flaws and limitations, because that just means you have a chance to grow. So let's gather round, as I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 designers who hated their own creations. Number 8, Peter Molyneux, FABLE 2. Veteran game designer Peter Molyneux is a bona fide legend of the industry for 2 main reasons. One, because he's managed to deliver games that astound and amaze fans the world over, and second, because he's renowned as being full of absolute shit sometimes. However, he took things very personally when it came to FABLE 2, which proved to be a sore spot for the developer, as despite pushing the concept of what it would do for players, by the time that FABLE 3 rolled around, he seemed to hate everything that previous game stood for. The much-loved dog from FABLE 2, for example, he referred to as just a dog. Gasp. And whilst presenting a FABLE 3 demo 2 years after its predecessor, the distinguished dev candidly stated that FABLE 2's story was rubbish and that it had huge design flaws. Now, one could argue that he did this to distance the old product and usher in the shinier new version that was FABLE 3, but it was a bit of a kick to the teeth for fans who saw a man call what he promised would be game-changing as now being absolute garbage. Well, the important thing is that I guess he learned his lesson, right? I mean, he didn't and claimed that you could do even more in FABLE 3 and then promised even more than that from Goddess. Oh, Peter, in your own words, you are a terrible PR person. Number 7, GREGG MAYLES, BRENTILDA, BANJO-KAZOOIE. Leicestershire-born dev GREGG MAYLES has been a key creative influence at the beloved and well-established British software house Rare for the last 3 decades, casting his magic on a plethora of the studio's finest titles. He's the guy that helped usher in Donkey Kong Country, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and more recently, buccaneering MMO Sea of Thieves. But that's not to say that he's been as enamored with each and every one of his projects as the public has been. And Mayles openly admits that some of his very worst work was in perhaps his finest accomplishment, the N64's Bear and Bird bonanza that was Banjo-Kazooie. And it all stems from one moment at the end of the game. Here things take a decidedly odd twist, as the jigsaw-loving duo must beat Big Baddie Gruntilda in a game show before they get the chance to ditch the witch for good through more traditional methods. Though incredibly proud of the furnace fun set piece, Mayles has since lamented that the means of learning some of the answers to this game show, which players had to do via Gruntilda's sister Brentilda, were some of the worst pieces of design that he ever created. In fact, he hated it so much that he made sure that Brenty never appeared in any other future games. Number 6, Phil Fish, everything. Sometimes, much like my relationship with Josh Brown, you love something so much that you begin to hate it. Such was the unfortunate case of Fez creator Phil Fish, who gradually saw his passion for the industry erode into absolute nothingness. In 2013, the solo developer spectacularly flounced from the game's development area, announcing that this is as much as I can stomach, and with it, work on Fez 2 was suspended indefinitely. And the sad thing is that you can actually watch his descent into self-loathing through the excellently made indie game The Movie. Here we see Fish completely unravel as the game fails to make shelves, and as he tries to battle a rather horrible legal issue with a former business partner. When Fez finally landed, it received widespread plaudits, but it was unfortunately riddled with bugs. Attempting to fix the issues, Fish found himself in another bitter fight, this time with Microsoft, who he claimed charged unreasonable fees for studios to update their products. Fish's wick was finally burned to the stub when game trailers Marcus Beer dismissed him as a hipster asshole and a tosspot. The Canadian had refused to talk when Microsoft dismissed his derogatory claims over self-publishing on Xbox One, and Fish subsequently described Beer as an inconsequential limey f*** who sits in judgment masturbating. It was shortly after this outburst that Fish suspended work on Fez 2, describing his decision as the end of a long, bloody campaign. He has not been seen in the industry since. Number 5. Eric Kane, Superman 64. Much as Victor Frankenstein grew to hate his monstrous vision that he unleashed on the world, so too did the team behind Superman 64 come to loathe the absolute abomination that they had managed to ship to the N64. However, unlike Frankenstein's monster, Titus's terrible title is precisely as horrible as everybody thinks. When he's not solving mazes by flying through rings, the craptacular man from Krypton is demonstrating powers that we'd not actually seen up until this point, such as literally falling through the goddamn world as if it were made of tissue paper. Now, Superman 64 made the entire studio look like idiots, and quite understandably, anyone who did own up to the credit on their resume pointed the finger of blame firmly away from themselves and to someone else. And in a candid and commendable interview with Proton John, the game's producer Eric CAEN openly admitted that there are many games that I am proud of and that this wasn't one of them. He said it's not even 10% of what we intended, before moving the blame onto the license holders and studio deadlines as the many rings of hell that he and his team had to work within. Number 4. Charles Cecil, The Goat, Broken Sword. Classic point-and-click adventure games are notorious at the best of times for their often logic-defying puzzles, stumping frustrated players until they're forced to look up the solution. However, there is one almost infamous puzzle that drove people up the walls, and that was found in Revolution's otherwise outstanding Broken Sword. The wretched goat puzzle has become almost the embodiment of point-and-click pain, and even has its own Wikipedia page. In premise, the objective is simple: get to the other side of the screen whilst avoiding the goat. Counter to almost every puzzle you've come across so far, rather than use George's inventory to distract the goat or manipulate its environment, the player must direct the American down a rather torturous route, causing the troublesome goat's tether to snag. At 2014's European GDC, the game's designer Charles Cecil was finally put on trial for his crime against adventure game design. During a post-mortem of his most beloved title, a member of the audience ironically shouted, "That goat!" With nowhere to hide and nearly 20 years of reflection, Cecil admitted that it was very unfair and absolutely bewildering. The veteran designer also revealed that the goat had earned him a bad reputation, and apparently on one occasion, upon learning that he designed Broken Sword, a taxi driver exclaimed, "So you're the one responsible for the goat." Number 3. Warren Spector, Deus Ex Invisible War. From goats to the black sheep of the Deus Ex family, let's talk about Invisible War, which, while not being an absolutely terrible game, could not hold a candle to its predecessor. It didn't help itself by boiling down all of the facets that made the original game so interesting to, well, next to nothing, all in an effort to appear more console-friendly for Xbox users. Ironically, in a game about upgrading the human frame, this was in no way an augmentation of the first game, and its state of affairs designer Warren Spector regretted the steps that it took. Whilst promoting Epic Mickey back in 2012, Spector reflected on some of the choices that had been made. "I never made a change in a game based on focus testing except once, and it was a mistake." He recalled, "It was Deus Ex Invisible War, actually. We focus tested concepts, and I was told, set the game further in the future and put the guy or the girl in a purple jumpsuit. People like purple jumpsuits. Why did I listen?" he groaned. Number 2. George Fan, Plants vs. Zombies. When George Fan first dreamed up the idea of mobile tower defense hit Plants vs. Zombies in 2009, he envisaged a gritty but sickeningly cute strategic test of wits. He did not imagine it being tweaked to maximize addiction and, with it, ad revenue. The game was a breakout hit, selling over 300,000 copies in its first 9 days on sale, and further enriching the bursting coffers of PopCap Games. Soon, EA began sniffing around, and the publisher added the studio to their colossal portfolio back in 2011. This is when Fan stopped being, well, a fan of his own game. In order to remain profitable 2 years on from launch, Plants vs. Zombies transformed into a free-to-play model with microtransactions ramped up in accordance. It absolutely wasn't why the designer entered the business, and in an embittered interview he told VentureBeat, "There are some aspects of this business model that make it so you're not making games to be fun anymore. You're implementing these strategies to hook people, but they're not necessarily having fun with your game anymore. They're compelled to play because they need to increase their level or feel like they're making some other kind of progression. But if you ask them, hey, take a step back, strip away all of this, is the moment-to-moment gameplay fun for you? In a lot of cases, I bet the answer would be no. Apparently, it was these criticisms that led Fan to be dismissed from EA. Pretty harsh. And number 1, Shigeru Miyamoto, Super Mario Bros. 3. Super Mario Bros. 3 might have been the best-selling game of all time upon its release, and an enduring slice of platforming perfection that's just as wonderful to play today as it was in 1988, but Shigeru Miyamoto thinks that his masterpiece is embarrassing. Yeah, that's right, he apparently is embarrassed of this. How? Well, speaking with Time while celebrating quarter of a century of Mario back in 2010, the Nintendo doyen sensationally stated his immense displeasure with one of the best games ever. I look at Super Mario 3 and was like, this was it? This is what we thought was good enough? It's utterly bizarre to think anyone could be upset with how this game turned out, and may well be a bit of false modesty. But then again, why would he bother pretending to fake displeasure with this game? I mean, possibly it could be so that people focus on the future rather than the past, but then again, if he truly doesn't think that this is enough, well, then other developers might as well give up now, as we'll never reach perfection. And there we go, those were 8 designers who hated their own creations. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments section below, and I hope that you have a lovely day, whatever you are getting up to. As I said before, nothing in life is perfect, and you know what? That is okay. We need to stop trying to be too hard on ourselves for not achieving things first time or being perfect in the eyes of society. Everyone is allowed to make mistakes, and everyone is allowed to grow from learning from them. That should be encouraged, not admonished.